Okay, so today we're going to look at graphing exponential functions. So we're really looking at new parent functions, and we're going to treat them the same way we did the sine and cosine functions we graphed last week. So the base function for an exponential is going to be y equals b to the x. Now, for example, this could be y equals 2 to the x, y equals 3 to the x, or anything similar. How we're going to choose our base table to build from is going to be the same across the board. All right, so for the x values, we're going to pick a -1, a 0, and a 1, right? Which in practice, in general, with the b, if I plug in -1, I get b to the -1, which is 1 over b. If I plug 0 in, I get b to the 0, which is 1. And if I plug 1 in, I get b to the first, which is just b. So if I change the base to a base 2, similar to the second one, when I grab my x values of -1, 0, and 1, what I end up with is I end up with a 1/2, a 1, and a 2, right, for the corresponding y values. And then if I use this y equals 3 to the x over here, when the x values are -1, 0, and 1, the y values are driven by 3 to the x, which would be 1/3, 1, and 3. All right, and that's what we're going to use as kind of our starting point, but then we're going to build out the table with our transformations just like we did in the last chapter. So if we scroll down here to the first example, we've got y equals 2 to the x plus 3, and then a -5 outside of the exponent. So first thing we have to do is identify the base so we can get that base table. All right, so it looks like we have 2 raised to a power. So our base parent function is going to be y equals 2 to the x. All right, so as we go through, we're going to use -1, 0, and 1. And then our y's will be, in this case, 1/2, 1, and 2. All right, so now we go into our transformation. So we ask ourselves, what happens to the x values? So that's driven by everything up here in the exponent. All right, so this is a shift left 3. So we're going to subtract 3 from each of those values. So -1 goes to -4. 0 goes to -3, and 1 goes to -2. All right, if I go to the y values, we're dropping everything by 5, so I'm subtracting 5 from each of those. So I'm at -4.5, -4, and -3. All right, and then just like last section, we're going to plot those points. So I'm back 4, down 4.5. There's my first point. Right, I'm -3, -4, so back 3, down 4, right, and then I'm at -2, -3, so we're right here. Now, that gives me 3 points to work with, right, so we really need an idea of what the base function looks like for this. So off to the side here, y equals 2 to the x. If I graph that, all right, our base starting points were here, right, and the overall shape of this graph increases as I go to the right and then decreases but levels off as I go off here to the left. All right, so it had a horizontal asymptote at 0, right? That's why it levels off at zeros, and then it grows without bound on the right. So when I shifted this whole thing down 5, I really ended up moving that horizontal asymptote down 5. And my graph now I can fill in with that same general shape that we see on the picture to the right, right? And I can go ahead and drop that in. And if I sketch that, it's going up in that direction, and then it's getting closer to the asymptote in this direction. All right, and that gives us a rough picture of the graph. Now, the asymptote is at y equals -5. Notice that's going to correspond to that shift down. The domain, this goes all the way from left to right on the graph, so it's -infinity to +infinity. The range, it starts down at -5, where the horizontal asymptote is, and then this one goes up forever, so to infinity. Now, an important thing with the horizontal asymptote, we're getting close to that, but we're not touching it with an exponential, so we have a parenthesis on that side, and then the infinities are always parentheses. In this one, as we look at it, we can tell it's moving up from left to right, so this is a growth function. All right, so we have a function that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, if they ask us to describe the transformations, Same thing as we've done before. This is shift left 3, and then shift down 5. And that takes care of our transformations. All right, I'll be back in the next video with another example.